Hello and welcome back to Monument Cycling. I'm Owen Lake and I'm joined by Harry Johnson. Harry, how's it going?
Hello, not too bad. How's it going for you, Owen?
I'm also pretty good. We've got a lot to talk about this week, so I think you've been going through, checking on the news, seeing what's happening. Why don't you kick us off?
So, in the British scene, there's pretty much been one massive story that dropped probably about a week ago, so we can't really avoid talking about St. Piran. Unfortunately, it's not a positive story. Last year, they had to grab a bunch of bikes at very short notice for their team, and they grabbed very cheap frames and bikes that had not been certified by the UCI, and then bought a load of stickers and stuck it on there as to kind of dupe the race comms, the race judges at races, which is not a great look. I mean, it's not a crazy, like on the scale of crimes you can commit to annoy the UCI, it's not wild. Like, the frames are legal, they are safe frames, basically. They just haven't gone through that very expensive and lengthy certification process that every single bike that's raced at the UCI level has to go through. They basically skipped out on that. Yeah,
it's kind of I guess they've put out a statement. They've been very clear that, as you said, they kind of passed all of those regulations for safety. But the question is, I guess, whether those rules make sense and what advantage you might gain by avoiding them. Something that I saw one kind of team or rider point out was that the other teams have to pay, extra out of their budget. If you've got I'm going to throw out random numbers. If you've got £100,000 budget and £50,000 of that is going on bikes for the year, because maybe you're not getting a team sponsor, if you can make that £10,000, boom, perfect. You've now got 40 grand extra that you can put onto, whatever you want, which does actually give you a benefit. Now it seems like, as you said, it's not an ideal situation because they had some issues with Lapierre, didn't they, beforehand, which meant that they were out of team bikes. Have you seen anything from riders or heard anything from riders that their take on it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion and whispers surrounding St. Piran, and there has been for a while. A lot of finances. Also in the article that dropped, there were accusations that they hadn't been paying riders or sponsors or something like this. So there was something that's gone unpaid, and there's been those sort of whispers around for a long time. There's a lot of smoke. A lot of the stuff they've denied, and they said that hasn't happening. But there is a lot of smoke. So I'd be very surprised if there wasn't anything, if there wasn't any fire, like if there was nothing going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Yeah, that's the thing as well, that the UCI have said they're investigating. What that means, the UCI do they really care about what's happening on the British elite scene? Clearly. But to what extent? And they've not indicated what the potential ramifications are. I think I've seen that you could be facing a fine of 10 to 100,000 Swiss francs if they rule against you. So that's a hefty chunk of money. And what British Cycling would do, I don't think I've seen a particularly strong response from them yet. We've not seen that they're opening an investigation. Whether they will internally, I think St. Piran still have to apply for their UCI license, which goes through the national governing body, in this case British Cycling. Whether they'll have to take any action, whether it'll be a kind of a slap on the wrist, whether there'll be a fine, or whether there'll be kind of some bigger ramifications for the team down the line. It's not a nice situation to be in, and it doesn't make, we often talk about trying to build up the scene, and it's a shame to have to, when you're kind of gearing up for the next season already, faced with this from the past. It's kind of a frustrating moment.
Yeah, I mean, a healthy St. Piran is good for the scene and it's good for the sport. And I think everyone wants there to be a continental team at that level competing at these sort of races that they have done this year. But it needs to be a healthy, law-abiding. I mean, I saw it from some people that are involved with Ribble World Tight, and whatever they were called before that, when they were kind of coming up through the scene through Hoob a few years ago with Dan Bigham and that lot. Their process, they had to go through a massive process of getting those bikes UCI kind of certified and sent through. So, and then eventually that team has disappeared and disbanded because they couldn't get sponsors or they couldn't financially keep up with the rest of the teams on the continental level. And then for them to see that, you know, this other team that's put on a bit of a pedestal on the UK scene has cut corners and skipped out on a lot of that process, it is a bit of a... I can understand why that can feel like a bit of a kick in the balls.
Yeah. One good positive thing to come out is definitely that St. Piran, I think, switched to Trek as a supplier for their bikes. And obviously, you know, we all know Trek. Trek are a huge reputable brand. So there is positivity, and if if it all comes out through the process, you know, and St. Piran are still racing in the future, you know, then it looks positive for the team and it looks healthy going forwards, and it does look like it was just a kind of a blip or a minor sort of a moment in their history rather than something going forward. But we'll have to wait and see for the whole process to conclude, which is frustrating. God knows how long that's going to take.
Yeah, it's definitely not the end of the story. I mean, there's lots of very, very serious accusations going on behind the scenes. There's a few legal proceedings that St. Piran are involved in at the moment, both from suing. I know they're suing Lapierre, as far as I understand it, for those bikes last year. Whether somebody's suing St. Piran, I imagine that's going to come about at some point. But yeah, I think hopefully, like I said, a healthy St. Piran is good for the sport. But the St. Piran that is being kind of thrown about at the moment, you got to ask like whether or not that's actually making the scene worse. Is that making it less inviting? Because there'll be sponsors, if it all comes out and, you know, St. Piran eventually disappears or whatever, kind of worst case scenario, and you've got sponsors that have been burnt by this situation, those sponsors are never going to want to sponsor a cycling team again.
Yeah.
And there's more sponsors that are gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just hurts the reputation a little bit more. So, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. The story's definitely not over. In slightly less depressing news, Criteriums. That's what we're going to talk about today. We talked about road races last week. The National Series, as well as the National Series of road races that we've talked about already, there is a National Series of Criterium races. Oh, can you give me an overview of what a Criterium is in one sentence?
Yeah, it's like Formula One or NASCAR on bikes in a city centre, 60 to 100 riders, all smashing it around for an hour as fast as you possibly can. First rider across the line wins. Boom.
It's brilliant. There's something very unique about the UK crit scene that I don't really see a lot. I mean, the UK crit scene, the US crit scene, is massive.
Yeah.
But they're not really Criteriums, are they?
They're
massive
really different,
open roads.
aren't they?
They're like 4 lanes wide, massive sweeping corners. That's not a crit. A crit is single file.
Yeah.
With 90-degree bends. Basically a cross race without the grass.
Yes, that's a perfect explanation. And I think it is amazing how you see these different crit scenes around the world. US, the European ones are a lot closer to what we have here with these old medieval cities, and you'll intentionally find like this weird route. They're like, oh yeah, there's a lane that's 2 meters wide that we can go down. Let's send them down there.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think it's the best racing in the UK. I think it's spectator friendly, sponsor friendly, city friendly, town friendly. I think it should be where the focus is, which is where you've put your focus as well, Owen, with the Cambridge Criterium, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end. But this year, the National Series of Criteriums, 7 rounds, each had on the same day 1 men, 1 women race. They're all kind of clumped together into 1 month, which I don't think is amazing. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why they're all within 1 month, but I think when you've got the National Series of Criteriums, like the 2024 National Series, having them all within the 26th of June to the 26th of July, it's just not, like, it's not great, because you've basically got everyone just peaking for that month. If you're just a quit rider, if you get injured or anything, you're out of all of them. You've got kind of no chance. There's no opportunity to vary it. Like if you're going badly for a couple of weeks, you're ruined basically. And they're all up north, apart from Guildford. And as a resident of Southampton, Like, it's basically impossible for me to get to the most of these. Fort Vale. Where is Fort Vale? I don't even know where that is.
It's cold. That's about as far north as you could possibly get away from you.
Exactly. That's a day. Yeah, a day or more that I would have to commit to do an hour-long crit. Like, I'm sorry, I love crits, but I'm not doing that.
It's very hard on the teams, and if you think of it maybe more as like the Tour de France or like the World Cup or something like that, where it's like, this happens in July. That's the way that we currently have to view it, rather than be like, it's the whole series, because that implies like, a whole 2024 season of racing. But no, it's like crammed into July, which is great. It makes it this one big thing, but yeah, it's hard on riders who want to make it, particularly the elite teams and any pro teams. You have to try and like logistically work out going to 7 races and a national road series in Lancaster, straight off the back of the national championships as well, and then maybe any other UCI commitments you have. So you could be looking at 11 plus race days within the space of 1 month. It's very tough on the teams, on the riders, on media, and the teams that are making these races happen.
Yeah, but it does start. Something I'm a fan of is it starting with Otley and Ilkley,
Yes.
2 little. Are they in Yorkshire? Near Yorkshire. I think they are in Yorkshire.
Yeah, Yorkshire.
Yeah, they're like 5 miles down the road from each other. 2 little villages, both awesome circuits, awesome races, and they're 2 days apart. So I raced it 2 years ago, went up for those couple of days, got a little Airbnb and stayed up there, and it was fantastic. So it kicks off with the Otley GP on the 26th of June, men's and women's. The women's is the Santini Otley Women's Grand Prix, and the men's race was the Rayner Foundation. Obviously, most of you know about the Rayner Foundation, helping juniors and under 23s racing out on the continent. So, Otley, what's the circuit like at Otley? I've actually ridden this circuit.
Yeah,
so
let's flip this around, Harry.
It's like 3-4 kilometres, I think. You start up. There's a little kind of rise through a town. Left turn a little bit higher, probably over a train bridge, I think, and then left, and you bomb down this little street outside kind of the back of the village. It's got loads of tree cover, there's potholes everywhere. It's terrifying. So you're bombing it down there at like 40 miles an hour on the first lap, and then you kind of get spat out left on a much more open road, and then a really, really fast left-hander into the finish straight. I think there's a video of Tom Pidcock coming around the outside of either Dean or Russ Downing at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, basically sideways, and winning. Probably there's 2017, 2018.
He comes second behind Matt Bostock actually, which is another rider who knows the course. But Russ Downing crashes. It's weird because Russ Downing is on the inside of the corner.
Yeah.
Pidcock overtakes him like on the limit of grip, on the outside of a corner. Somehow he makes it through, and I think Russ is almost put off balance by it in a certain way, and he ends up clipping the barriers and going down pretty heavy.
But yeah, I love that corner. I think the course on its own is great. I was a bit spooked by racing with so many people kind of taking the risks that you've got to take in that level of crit. But they opened with the women's race, and we had Frankie Hall, a name that we talked about a lot in the road racing pod last week, in a 2-up kind of breakaway with Danny Watkinson from London. 15 seconds ahead of the peloton, basically, with Kat Ferguson and Esther Wong leaving them home from Shibden Apex. So the 2 juniors, again, that we talked a lot about, popping up there. But it's pretty rare that it finishes in that kind of little group. Do you remember how that race played out?
Yeah, so I didn't think they would stay away. I remember watching this because if a little group is going to go, if ones or twos, you would think it's going to go late, because it's, as you mentioned, like it's a very fast course in places, and the bunch can bring a group back quite easily. So if you're going to go alone, like you need the power to outpace the bunch, and that's really only going to be over 1 or 2 laps. So when they went relatively early, and the bunch just like was ticking over, letting this gap get bigger and bigger. You're like, what's going on here? Surely they're going to bring them back, and they just never did. And you end up going into the finale with Frankie Hall versus Danny Watkinson, and Frankie Hall came out on top. It's incredible, really good ride.
Yeah, so she's won at least one crit so far this year, and a National Series road race. So, I mean, is it her best year so far? I'm not too familiar with the years before this, but
I would say
definitely
so,
stronger than 2023, I'd say.
Yeah, she's had a really good year, and I think that period of form for her, you saying earlier about the fact that it's very difficult if you miss your form in that period, or if you get ill and you lose a few weeks, you've wiped out your entire crit series. She got her form perfect, and that just went perfectly in her favour, means that, boom, she's on form for every single one of these races. She was a really good year.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got some familiar names. Emma Jeffers, really strong crit rider, did very well at the National Champs this year and last year. Robin Clay, again,
she's a
in the top 10
champion
as
this
well.
year, wasn't she? Yeah, national champion.
Yeah, on the bike throw, I think, I remember.
Yes.
But it was a very close finish.
Yeah.
But yeah, big names. Over in the men's race, the Rayner Foundation, we had, of course, Matt Bostock ahead of Rob Scott and Jim Brown. Those three names are going to pop up a lot, especially Matt Bostock. Most people will know who he is. Huge crit rider in the UK, racing for the new Ribble Rebellion team, who went over and smashed up the US scene as well. But that did come down to a big bunch sprint. We had some other names that we've mentioned before. William Truelove for the Scott Redding team, Tim Shawman, who I mentioned in the road racing podcast as more of a crit rider, kind of showing his form there, and Ollie Reese, again, a name that popped up a lot in the road races. As you said, if you get that form right, not that I think Ollie Reese was probably aiming for the month of National Roads and Safe Series and National Crit Series. I think he had some bigger goals, but if you get that kind of peak right, then you'll tend to do quite well in all of them, which is what we've seen. And Alec Briggs, the UK crit specialist, Techers rider.
Yes, yeah. In fact, Matt Bostock coming in there, and you mentioned Alec Briggs as the specialist. I would say Matt Bostock is possibly the best crit rider. Okay, I'm going to go out there on a limb and say the best crit rider in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think... It depends what you define as crit, which, I mean, there's a correct definition and an incorrect definition. And our definition is obviously correct.
Obviously.
It's not a US crit. It's the UK crit. Almost like a Belgium Kermesse, but a little bit tighter. Yeah. I don't think it'd be difficult to bet against Bostock in any of those kind of... He'll probably win about half, I reckon, at crit, which, with so much random stuff happening, is an incredible kind of percentage of wins. Will Roberts for St. Piran up there as well. But yeah, really good race. Nice start to this year.
Yeah.
Matt Bostock kind of kicking off his crit campaign. 2 days later, we moved over to Ilkley. Again, very good circuit. I really like Ilkley. Completely different to Otley. Ilkley starts basically with a sharp right-hander, really, really narrow course on the main bit of the course you're on, where the action happens. Really tight right-hander, directly up like I don't know how steep it is. I think it's like 15%, but it feels like 25 for only a few hundred metres, and then you turn right, kind of weave through some houses and some pretty open roads, and then send it down this really steep, short descent into a right-hander back onto the high street of Ilkley, over the start-finish line, and then back straight up the hill again. Really short. There's not many crits in the UK that have that sort of climb in them, if any, actually. I don't think I can name another crit.
It's funny, you've got Otley and Ilkley 2 days apart, and they both have that. They both have a descent leading into the finish line, which is not, normally. And I swear I remember a comment on the Ilkley Grand Prix finish being like, "Oh, I can't believe the organisers have this like dangerous descent into the finish." And I'm like, no, that's normal. That's what we expect. And normally you would think, I'm not going to have a descent and a turn 200 meters before the finish of a race, but these ones like own that, and they make it incredible. And you've raced them. You mentioned the Otley one. How's the Ilkley one as a one to kind of race down that?
I mean, it suits a brave rider. which I was not, unfortunately. But you're doing the climb, like, I forgot how many laps it is. I mean, the race is 50 minutes long. I think the laps are a few minutes. So you're doing the climb, like, tens of times. And it just saps it out of you. Like, you can do it once or twice really fast. Anyone can do it really fast once or twice. But doing it that 30th time, sitting at, like, 600 watts or something stupid. And then, yeah, that final corner is pretty... you have to be on the limit every time to hold the wheel. Otherwise, you're chasing the wheel in front of you for the whole of the back straight. And then if you haven't closed it from that final corner, or the first corner, you're then going to have to chase it up the climb. And, you know, 10, 15 laps of that, and you're cooked. You're doing so much more work than everyone else.
Yeah.
There's quite a... I mean, it's funny now because I know that Harry didn't hurt himself that badly, but there's quite a funny clip of Harry Mack just flying into the sand bed, the sand.
That's we'll have to find that. Have to
hay
find
bales.
Post it.
Yeah, into the hay bales at the bottom on the final corner, just because he cooked his brakes a little bit too much.
Yeah.
So again, we started with the women's race, and we had Millie Cousins, solo victory, 43 seconds ahead of Robin Clay. How did that happen?
She's just a beast. Like, Millie Cousins is one. You know, you're more likely to see her on the cross scene. You know, doing really well every year, smashing the national trophy. You give her an inch and she'll take a mile. You know, like, she's really, really strong, and this was her second victory at Ilkley, so she knows how to win. She knows how to race this course, and yeah, she just went away. She can as you said, she can handle that climb. I think something that you kind of touched on is that you go from quite a wide road to a small road up the climb, and you go straight into the climb. Which means if you're on the front, you can take that however you want. You can carry a lot of speed into it. It's a hell of a lot easier to be on the front at Ilkley versus at the back or in a bunch. It's like a washing machine in the bunch that then hits this climb and slows down, accordions and stretches and comes back together. Millie on the front, time trial mode, really good at cornering thanks to that cross skill. And she can just take that however she wants every single time. Really, really good.
You can also afford, as you reminded me there, if you're a single rider on that kind of course and you've got a decent gap, you can afford to have a bit more of a flatter power profile. So you can go up the climb basically as you would in any race situation. You can go up the climb easier and then just hold the power a little bit higher on the flats, because you haven't got to worry about group dynamics or people around you, where the people in the group chasing are probably going up the climb 5-10 seconds faster, but then losing all that time on the rest of the course because either they don't want to work. Yeah, you're sorting out lines or positions in the group and attacking each other and all that kind of stuff. So she probably saved a little bit of energy whilst being on her own, which is another fun dynamic of crit racing. But in the top 10 we had Lucy Lee, another name that we'll recognise. We had Olympian Megan Barker in 6th for Techers. Joe Tinley, legend, in 8th. So yeah, stacked field there. Again, over in the men's race we had Rob Scott, after his second place 2 nights before for Techers, picking up the win in 49 minutes. And then it looks like they were a pretty small group. So we had Cole Davies for Ribble Rebellion, Ollie Reese again popping up in 3rd, Toby Barnes for Spectre. Matt Bostock looked like he missed out on a break and then won the sprint behind for 5th. Is that what happened? That's
pretty much it, yeah. The Ribble Rebellion had a really strong team, the real strength in depth for that race. And I think Cole was coming into some really good form, and it was the first time he'd ever raced this race, but the way he went across to the gap, I think Ribble Rebellion missed out on getting a rider in that group, and Cole was the one who kind of saw it, picked up on that, and jumped across, and man, he just teleported across. It was ridiculous. Matt Bostock, of course, in that situation, then you can't chase. He's going to marshal kind of behind, and we go, well, we've got the trump card that if this group comes back, Bostock's going to win the sprint. So it's a really strong card to play, but I don't think they counted quite on Rob Scott's form for that one.
No, and it's a really fun, not that I've actually ever sprinted properly at the end, but it's a really fun sprint going from the descent. It's not really dangerous as such, because you're not going that quickly, because you've got that turn and it's so tight. It's not like you're sending a peloton down a hill into a sprint. It's not like you've got 100 riders. There's only ever going to be a few riders sprinting against each other. So it's really tactical and definitely not a normal sprint. But we've got the same names, Jim Brown and Alec Briggs, popping up in the top 10. Again, a few St. Piran riders. The name who shall not be named, St. Piran. But yeah, really, really good races. And then we moved over a few days later to Guildford, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, the Parkour Guildford Grand Prix over at the women, won by Ailey Shaw. Another name that we spoke a lot about in the road racing podcast, and she won it ahead of Alex Morris.
Alex Morris. So that's a big scalp to take, because of course she's on a World Tour team. I think she was... I don't want to do Alex a disservice here, and I seem to remember that she was coming back from an injury or something. But even so, it's not every day that you get the opportunity to go head-to-head with a World Tour rider and then beat them. And that's what crits get to do, isn't it?
Is she... did she get through Canyon through the Zwift Academy?
Yes.
Is that who I'm thinking of?
Yes, yeah, exactly that one.
Really strong. And then Lucy Benezet Mins? Benezet?
Who is a junior.
Apologies, Lucy.
A junior rider. So, yeah, it was one of those days of, like, everything that you think just got thrown out the window. We've got a junior rider who's doing incredibly strong. We've got a domestic rider beating a World Tour rider. Guildford does that. Guildford's a really, you've raced Guildford. So talk us through that. How is Guildford different to other crits?
Of course, we didn't mention Guildford. Yeah, so I think a massive part of the UK crit scene is every crit circuit has a lot of history and a lot of personality. Like, they're all very, very unique. They've all got their own character. As we've spoken about with Ilkley and Otley, they've got the climb and the little lanes, and they've all very specific corners that all are only that corner. And Guildford, is no different there. It's absolutely wild. You've got the cobble. If you've ever been to Guildford, you'll know about the cobbled high street that's on a climb through the middle of Guildford. The finish is at the end of that cobbled climb, and then they've changed it recently a little bit, so it goes a little bit further out over the top of that climb. Then you've got a 180-degree hot dog turn at the end. You're shot down the other side of the high street, like the road over, down a climb, and then you're sent from like quite a big 2-lane road, 90-degree left-hander, into a road that's probably 2 meters wide. It's not a road; it's a little lane. And in the middle of that corner, you've got a little curb that's a decent curb that you've got to jump up in the middle of the apex of the corner, and then try and get back into the middle of the road so you don't hit the curb on the other side. And then you shoot down there for 50 metres or so, and then it's like an off-camber left-hander onto cobblestones, and then you just sprint up the climb to the finish. It's crazy. It's wild. I've done it a couple of times. It's always, apart from the first 1 or 2 laps, you'll never see like a peloton like you would even in the other crits. It's just single file, one rider at a time, full gas. There's no reason you'd ever go up the climb not going full gas.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. It's super, super hard, really technical. I mean, really fun to race. But yeah, just absolutely wild.
Fun to watch for me. I don't think I'd want to race that one.
Yeah, like I said, these are great spectator events. We had Ailey Shaw, obviously winner of the National Road Series, winning this round. It's another rider that obviously hit their form quite well. Over with the men, we had Rob Scott win again. Mm-hmm. 23 seconds ahead of Toby Barnes for Spectra, and Alec Briggs coming in third. I think, didn't he get third the year before as well? Or second the year before?
I think so. He definitely podiumed. Alec loves... I get the impression that he really loves the Guildford course. And it's a bit closer, he's a London guy. Techers is... the riders are all over the place, but it's London at heart, isn't it? The London identity. So always one that they target. And to see Rob Scott soloing off the front, in kind of their home race, Alec Briggs podiuming as well, I think he can be very happy with that, and happy with how Techers came on. They've gone from being a bit of a couple of years ago being the meme team to being like, oh wow, these guys are contenders now for the win. Yeah,
I mean, it looks like the race normally goes that it starts crazy fast with somebody sprinting off, and then it pretty much just gets whittled down to a group of about 10 riders by the end, which is what happened here. There was 8 at the finish. David Hurd Tom Armstrong, Tom Cousins, Harry Mack getting in the top 5, and Will Truelove all staying up there, which is the kind of the names you'd expect at that level of crit racing in the UK. But yeah, just absolutely wild.
Yeah.
And a really good event. Taking the step up to National A. I think last year was the first year that it was a part of the National Series. Before that it was just a Nat B. But yeah, really good event. So 3 really good events to kick stuff off. And then a few days later, we moved over to Dudley, which is miles away, isn't it? What's the Dudley course like? I've never done this one.
Dudley is it's oddly technical because it's based around like the hill that kind of rises up through the centre of Dudley. You have this figure of 8. Finish goes up to a roundabout, turns right, loops around, comes back down to the roundabout again, goes right again there and loops around in this sort of figure of 8. And that corner is like a little bit of a death trap, It's slightly off camber. It always seems to be damp in Dudley as well around that time. I don't know why. I don't think the organiser wants it to be damp, but it becomes very technically challenging on what should be quite a straightforward course. And you always end up with this whittling down from a big bunch of 60 to 100 riders, just whittling down and down and down until you end up with a sprint of like 15. So it's a tough one. I think that's kind of what happened this year. Or was there a gap, particularly in the women's race? Was that Ailey Shaw?
So we had Ailey Shaw win it in front of Frankie Hall, both popping up again. Then we had Jennifer Powell, the name I haven't seen before, ahead of Kira Bond. So the top 4 were 21 seconds ahead of Abigail Miller, another junior.
Yeah, the juniors really came through this year. And I think that's a trend that you see in the crit races, is that the junior riders who are allowed to race on the National A races suddenly can show their worth. And the distance that normally differentiates between them and the top riders in the senior races isn't a factor. So it's just like pure power. It's like a track race.
It's also these crit races definitely favour somebody that is a bit batshit crazy and doesn't have any fear, which you're more likely to have as a junior because you don't really know, like you haven't got anything else going on in your life. You haven't really seen a big crash. You haven't had a big crash. So a lot of the juniors you'll see will just go wild into each of these corners, and then maybe calm down a bit. And by the time they're 25, they're washed and they're done.
Got the fear of crashing again. I see this in myself.
Yeah, I definitely hit that point a while ago. Over in the men's race, we had Matt Bostock. So we've had Bostock, Rob Scott, Matt Bostock.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of question of who the big names are in the sport. Ahead of Reese Britton on St. Piran, so their best result so far. And then Rob Scott for Techers again in 3rd. Tom Armstrong again, Toby Barnes, Tom Cousins, Will Roberts. All the same names popping up.
Yeah.
Really competitive from those guys. And those guys are 12 seconds ahead of 8th place. So again, like a little group. I didn't watch the race, but I imagined they kind of whittled them down.
Yeah.
Rather than like a traditional breakaway forming at the start and then holding everyone off.
Yeah, well, the two of those riders they're former teammates. Matt Bostock and Rob Scott are former teammates, and were both part of like the super team that was Canyon DHB with Sun God, 8085, that sort of strain of team. So they know how they know how they race, and they know how to counter each other. They know how to what each other's strengths and weaknesses are. And it's a really interesting dynamic to now see them on different teams going head to head, because they were two of the strongest riders.
And it's a really fun dynamic. They've both got teammates as well that are also extremely strong. Obviously, Alec Briggs for Techers. I know they've got a few juniors that kill themselves at races for some of the other riders, which is cool to see. And then Matt Bostock has got riders like Tom Cousins, as we've mentioned, and Max Rushby, and then Cole Davis as well at Ilkley. Then we moved over to Sheffield, which is, where's that? Up north somewhere, miles away. Nowhere near Southampton.
Everything north of London for you is like, that's just somewhere in the ether up north. Yeah, Sheffield. For us, middle of the country to north of the country, edge of the Peak District. But it's a really nice race. Sheffield, obviously a nice city. it goes through like the Peace Gardens. They have a little bit of a market set up on the day, and it's a really good vibe in the middle of Sheffield, on quite a technical, tight, twitchy course. That you've got this slightly narrower finish line, goes through those Peace Gardens, and then it's onto like some like flagstones and some cobbles before sweeping back down a hill and back to the start finish. So a really good course that has often resulted in a breakaway of some shape or form.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some incredible riders pop out from Sheffield, even specifically the Cycling Sheffield team. Most recently, James McKay moving to St. Piran. Before that, there was Connor Swift.
Yeah.
Obviously, world famous Ineos rider, Connor Swift now. But yeah, he came from Cycling Sheffield before he joined Madison back in the day. I think Pidcock, I don't know whether he was on the Cycling Sheffield, but obviously he's from Yorkshire.
Yeah. Although, yeah, it's... in fact, I remember racing against Connor Swift, so that's a blast from the past. when he was a Cycling Sheffield rider. So they've got this long history, yeah, as you say, this long history of bringing riders through, supporting cycling in the region, and also, supporting that race, the Sheffield Grand Prix. So yeah, it's a really good one, and this year we had some good racing.
Yeah, we had Kira Bond for the Alba development team pop up again. I think she's on the podium in one of the other races I just mentioned, but she won it solo, 15 seconds ahead of Jenny Hole for Loughborough Lightning, the team over in Loughborough, surprisingly, with Megan Barker, Olympian, on Tekkers on the podium. So Tekkers are they're doing really well on the men's and women's races. Ailey Shaw again popping up, our development. So it was her teammate Kira Bond that won that. So I assume she played some sort of teammate role. Sophie Lewis for Das Hutchinson. Sophie's an Olympian as well, isn't she?
She is definitely a Commonwealth Games and world's level rider. I can't remember if she made the Olympic squad this year. That's on me, sorry.
I think I'll call it. I think she's an Olympian. And Amy Perriman for Tekkers again. Monica Greenwood, who took the step up to Team Coop, high-tech products. I know she was racing over in Asia recently. So she's done quite well. And then Frankie in the top 10 as well, again in 10th. But yeah, that was quite a good race. How did Kira get? Was she away for long? Yeah,
she went away. I think she went away solo, and this is it's like an adopted race for her. She's I think she's either American or Canadian. I can't remember which one. Sorry, Kira. But she lives in that area now, and I think she goes to university at Sheffield. So it's kind of like an adopted home race for her. She clearly knew she knows the circuit, was targeted. The Alba team are very strong. If you've got a rider like Ailey Shaw as your teammate, it's like a massive win already. So when she goes away and people are looking like, okay, are we going to bring Ailey Shaw up to Kira? But Kira did really well to hold that on her own because it's a fast course that's hard to stay away on, and she did it admirably.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant performance by her. Obviously pretty consistent, getting on the podium more than once. Over in the men's, the Bike Box Allen Open Grand Prix. What a name. Everyone loves a bike box. We had Toby Barnes win solo as well. So 2 solo wins ahead of Matt Bostock winning the sprint, as usual. Ahead of Tom Armstrong. Jacob Scott, another one of the riders that was from that kind of Canyon super team that raced the Tour of Britain every year. Always winning the KOM jersey, I remember. Yeah. Ahead of Will Truelove, Rob Scott, Ollie Reese, Reese Britton, Will Roberts, Alec Briggs, all in the top 10. So all names that we all recognise and always been in the top 10 basically every week. And Harry Tanfield as well. Yeah. Popping up in 13th, ex-World Tour.
It's a really strong scene. And Toby Barnes is another rider who's coming from that cyclocross background. Just hearing the scrabbling in the background of it.
Yeah, she's gone.
Sorry, what was I saying? Yeah, so Toby Barnes is another rider with that really strong cyclocross background that stands him in good stead on the crits. And that's a trend you often see is okay, the riders like the 1 hour racing of cyclocross. You said at the beginning, a crit is it's really comparable to a cyclocross race. Toby Barnes, you'll see him winning or podiuming on almost every single national trophy race and him winning solo at Sheffield is not a surprise. He was more than capable of doing that. But it was a big coup for Team Spectra Racing. Big win for them.
Yeah, the first non-Rob Scott or Matt Bostock win.
Exactly.
Of the series.
Yeah. Funnily, Toby Barnes, another former Canyon rider with Sun God. And,
yeah, of course, yeah.
So yeah, that team, you can see the effect it's had on the British scene.
Yeah. A few days after that, we jumped over to Fort Vale. Well, I don't actually know where Fort Vale is.
Fort
Is it
Vale
Scotland?
is the sponsor. Colne is the place. But Colne is...
see, that's how
Yeah.
much I... It's too north for me.
So Colne is... is it a couple miles from Manchester? It's pretty north.
Okay, it's not too bad.
It's quite, well, I say a couple miles, This is in the grand scheme of how far from Sheffield. Sorry, from Southampton. But it is... often it has a depleted peloton because of that. I think the riders are getting a little bit tired and they always pick this one again. It's the hardest to get to. So, if you're not fighting for the victory, this is the time to sub out some of your riders and just take a rest before the next few.
Yeah, I mean, even saying that, it's the similar sort of names that are popping up. So for the women, we had Sophie Lewis beat out Ailey Shaw and Lucy Glover, another incredible junior on Shibden Apex. And they were 2 seconds ahead of, it looks like the peloton behind them. Was that a breakaway or was that just a very good sprint from those three?
I honestly can't remember. Hold on, I'll be able to tell you. Give me 2 seconds.
Sophie Lewis, obviously very good track rider. Whether she's an Olympian or not is apparently up for debate. Same sort of riders popping up. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say she I think she won Otley last year as well. So Sophie Lewis is one of those riders that's capable. If you give her the opportunity, she'll win a sprint and she'll win a breakaway. So Colne is no surprise.
Yeah, just very impressive for all of them. And Danny Watkinson is again popping up in 13th. So a very good year for her. Zan Kreese for Spectra up there in 8th. Sam Fawcett, who we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yep.
At your race. But yeah, very, very, very strong race from those women. Over in the men, at the Colne Grand Prix, not Fort Vale, Matt Bostock ahead of Rob Scott and Jacob Scott and Rhys Britton, Jim Brown, Toby Barnes, Matty Dobbins for X Speed. That's a name I haven't read on the results so far. Looks like he's quite a few Brits racing for the X Speed Conti team.
Yeah.
Bit of a unique setup. They're Canadian registered, but they just kind of take anyone, any nationality, and then go quite a good mix of races. But then Max Rushby, Tom Armstrong, Joe Beckinsdale for the Scott Redding teams. They've popped up quite a bit this year. But yeah, looks like a pretty traditional Matt Bostock sprint victory. Yeah,
Bostock's won this race before. He's the thing with Colne is it's almost like an elongated velodrome. It's like an 800 meter long course that has almost no elevation change and almost no corners. It's like an oval. So if you have to bet on anyone, it's going to be the guy with the fastest sprint. It's going to be Matt Bostock, and he's won there before. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he has the team to protect him throughout the race. So it's not a surprise, and it's a race. He's almost like the Max Verstappen but maybe a little bit more personable than Max Verstappen.
He's the Matt Bostock. There's nobody like Matt Bostock.
Verstappen is the Bostock of Formula One.
Exactly. Another name I've just spotted was Frank Longstaff for Shield's Ducini race team, popping up in 16th. Another name that we're going to mention in a little bit. Moving over to the last round of the series, 26th of July, Beverley. Where is Beverley?
It's Yorkshire.
Again?
Yeah.
All I know is I just know they're too far away for me to get to. Really.
Yeah, if you're a betting man, you could just bet that most of these are going to be Yorkshire. Beverley's a really good course, and it's one that we had previously, has always been part of the series, has held the national championships before. But it had this sort of hiatus, and the organiser of Dudley, Chris Lawrence, brought it back. which is really good because it is a really nice course and delivers some good racing. And I think you had this ebb and flow this year where you weren't really sure what was going to happen. You know, the riders would ping off the front and each one looked like it might stay away, and then it would come back all of a sudden. And it's a really good, delivers some really good racing.
Yeah, so it finished in a bunch sprint for the women, won by Sophie Lewis again. Great season. Ailey Shaw again in second. Just a crazy amount of results. I haven't added up the amount of podiums that she's got, but that must be like 6 or 7 across the road and crit series in 1 year, which is
incredible.
Interesting to know whether that's more or less than Matt Bostock. Maybe we can do like a stats show.
Yes.
And see that. Amy Perriman again for Techers, up in the top 4. Lucy Lee, Kara Bond, Sam Fawcett again popping up. Just a really fun race, that one. That looks like. Over in the men, guess who? Well, actually, I'm not going to tell you how to guess. Who won Beverley out of a bunch sprint?
Could it possibly be Matt Bostock?
It was indeed Matt Bostock, ahead of... Guess who it was ahead of?
I don't know. Is it maybe a guy with dinosaurs on his team kit?
No, I tripped you up there. It was Jim Brown. His teammate, so Ribble Rebellion went 1-2 in a bunch sprint in a crit, which is pretty mad. And then Alec Briggs picking up his best result of the season in third for Techers. Jacob Scott, what a surprise, up in fourth. Will Roberts. Rob Scott, only sixth. What a disappointing final round for Rob Scott.
To see sixth as a disappointing result. I think that goes to show the strength of some of these riders that, if they end up in sixth, you're like, oh, that's a surprise. I would have expected him to be much higher.
I mean, to get the consistency, obviously reading it out probably doesn't seem like much, but the consistency to be podiuming such a dynamic race every single, well, not week, because there's more than one a week, but every single round. Like, you're not getting caught up in crashes. You're not missing out on a split. Every single race is it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And really impressive for all of those guys. But the final round, we had Tom Cousins, Toby Barnes again up in the top 10. Harry Mack in 12th. Harry Birchall, 15th.
Yeah, strong rider.
I know he's been doing quite some big races this year, so maybe obviously didn't focus on the crit scene too much, but he was a big player in 2023. Just looking down, seeing all these other names here. So there's only 49 finishers. I say finishers. The guy that finished 49th was 6 laps down. So whether you count as a finisher, there's only 29 on the lead lap at the finish, which is pretty normal for these races. Which is just, shows how crazy they are. Oh, here we go. I've got the final National Circuit Series standings as well.
Far
so
away.
As well as the road race standings, obviously there's a big story of James McKay chasing down George Kimber at the road races. There's the same thing going on at the Circuit Series. So we have, unsurprisingly, Ailey Shaw winning the Circuit Series. So 2 for 2 at the 2 National Series for under 23 rider Ailey Shaw. I don't know. Has she announced anything for next year? What's she doing next year?
I don't know, honestly. In fact, let's have a quick look, see if we can find anything. Because
I'd hope quite a lot. And she won by a massive margin to her teammate Kira Bond. Lucy Lee and Frankie Hall both with Das Hutchinson in 3rd and 4th, pretty close. And then obviously the names that have been popping up.
Here we go.
The whole time.
Got the kind of the scoop on Ailey Shaw. It's UAE she's gone to. 2-year contract with UAE, so boom. Fully deserved, she is a complete all-round rider, and I think I will be expecting to see her get some really good results in the World Tour.
It's something we don't really see from the men's side of the sport, and I think something that a lot of people are conscious about that we're missing is that pathway through British racing up to professional racing at an international level. And I think it's really good that we've seen somebody basically focus on British racing all year, absolutely smash it at all those races, and then go straight up from there to that international stage, rather than kind of, you get to junior, and then you're like, okay, I can't race in the UK because nobody cares about these races, so I need to go off to Europe, and then they kind of vanish for a few years, and then not. And I don't blame these riders individually at all, but it's just a kind of a symptom of the problem of British racing. But it's good to see that that's obviously changing a little bit, going back that way. Over in the men's race, the Open series. No surprises who was first and second, but who do you think won out of those two names, Bostock or Rob Scott for Techers?
So it
was very close.
The big thing for me was that I remember Bostock had I say very bad. He had by his standards, a blip at Guildford, didn't he? So Rob Scott probably had the higher consistency.
He did. 322 points to Matt Bostock's 314. 8 points.
That is that one blip, and it shows how consistent you have to be, because if, say, on the last race, the Bostock wins, if Rob Scott comes sixth, well, what if he crashes out? What if he punctures? What if he just has a bad day and he comes 49th? It shows how incredible your consistency has to be across 7 races, like quick fire, one after one another.
Yeah, and then we had Toby Barnes rounding off the podium in third for Spectra, Tom Armstrong for Wheelbase. So those 4 teams are kind of the 4 teams of the National Circuit Series of 2024, which is good to see. Really strong British teams. Alec Briggs in 5th, always a character on the.
It wouldn't be the same
without
Alec. I think he brings a different element to racing that is. Every sport needs somebody like Alec Briggs. It needs somebody who's got some charisma, who's got some pizzazz, who can liven up and be a crowd favourite, even when he's not winning.
Of course. And then after that series ended, the only other National A Criterium of the year. So all of these races are National A level, all the top points band, but they're all part of the National Series Crit, all within British cycling. And there was one other event. One other crit of the year that attracted similar sort of start lists, which was the Cambridge Criterium, organised by yourself.
Indeed.
How did the Cambridge crit go, just from a racing perspective? We'll get into the organising afterwards, but how did the actual racing and the circuit go?
Pretty much as brilliantly as we could have hoped for. So when we designed the course, I based it a lot on Otley. It was a 2.6 kilometre circuit with 4 corners. So when you hear 4 corner crit, there's a high chance that does not pay off, and you end up with the most boring racing imaginable. But instead, we had the men's race in a final 500 meter solo attack, like Fabian Cancellara, turning on the afterburners with 500 meters to go and riding away from the bunch. That was Frank Longstaff, incredible. And the women's race, this breakaway that goes and sort of just eking out a gap, and it's never too far, always within sight. You don't know if they can make it. They hold it all the way to the line, and Sam Fawcett wins the sprint there. So brilliant. And, shout out to 2 of my usual videographers and photographers, Honor Elliott and Theo Clark, who actually took the opportunity to race the amateur races there, and they both won their respective races. So shout out to them as well on that.
Yeah, I mean, I competed in the Open race in the afternoon, so I got to watch those 2 support races and the women's race afterwards. And all 3 of those races that I watched and didn't compete in were brilliant races. So obviously something went right with the course that is producing good races. But yeah, it was Frank Longstaff that, as you said, that incredible kind of last 500 metre attack rather than a sprint.
Yeah.
That caught everyone off guard, caught off Bostock and his teammates that had been controlling for the last hour of racing.
Yeah.
And picked up the win.
That was a tough one. I spoke to Matt Bostock afterwards. We'd worked closely with Ribble throughout the season, and Bostock, I've known him a long time, seen him winning. He wanted to win Cambridge, probably in part due to our large prize pot, but also because I think it represented a nice way for him to cap the season. And I just weren't expecting somebody with the caliber and the power of Frank Longstaff to light it up like that. And it was absolutely incredible to see, and it's exactly the sort of way you want people to race, to take those opportunities. And even if Frank hadn't done that, it had been a much more attritional race than we expected. It had been flying off the back. You raced it, and no doubt you're one of those riders that helped make it attritional. So how was it from within the bunch?
Yeah, I helped make it attritional from the fact that I was off the front for a little bit, and then I was one of the riders that I got attritioned by getting spat out the back. So I was at each end. It was definitely a fun day out for me. But yeah, great event. What did you make of the year as a whole? The whole crit year.
I love
National
crits.
A crit.
I've got bias here. I absolutely love crits. As crit seasons go, I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of seeing someone like Bostock and Rob Scott, Bostock winning a lot, and you might think that gets boring. It really didn't for me. Him versus Scott was a brilliant battle on the men's side, and it kept it thrilling all the way to the final round. And then on the women's side, again, like Ailey Shaw, you're thinking, she's winning a lot, but actually the other teams were adapting and finding ways to like break that Alba dominance. And they're strong enough. You've got riders like Sophie Lewis who can take the fight to them. I think as seasons go, it was a really good one for me to watch. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. To use an F1 analogy, the Rob Scott Matt Bostock battle was like Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen in 2021.
Yeah,
kind of each round trading wins. That's the sort of domination I'd want to see, where it's competitive domination. Like, you don't really know who's going to win, but you just know there's going to be some really hard, good racing. And yeah, like I said at the start, I just think crits are brilliant. Like, they're super friendly to beginners. They're quite easy to kind of get into, and then the skill, like, you can just go as far as you want on the skill level. Obviously, these races are essentially pro races, pro level races anyway. I think it's good for the sponsors, good for the towns. I think there should be more across the country. And just because I'm stuck in the south, I think there should be more down here.
We'll see. I think the flip side of a crit is how expensive they are. And I'm sure we'll do an episode on this. They can be very expensive to run because you're in the city. And logistically, it's very difficult versus a road race that's out on a open course somewhere. Suddenly you're going, right, we're going to close down a chunk of a city or a town for a significant part of the day. So there are pros and cons to it from an organiser's side, and I think pros and cons from a rider's side. We're really happy to see Ailey Shaw stepping up to UAE, but I know a lot of riders are concerned that if they race crits too much, it pigeonholes them, and the big World Tour teams don't really care. They're not looking at crit results. They're looking at, okay, how was your result on this 200-kilometre race in the Pyrenees? Which is a shame, because we saw riders like Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert make their name in cyclocross, which is a 1-hour race. It would be great for World Tour teams to start looking at crit races as an indicator of future performance as well.
Yeah, I think that would be positive. We've both picked one name from men and women as kind of a standout rider. I've gone for the boring choice for the women. I've just gone Ailey Shaw. Like, I know it is going to be boring, and it's the obvious choice, but she is so far ahead of everyone else this year in terms of consistency. Maybe not. I mean, obviously she's won quite a few, but maybe not kind of on those individual days when she's getting beaten. But just to be able to be up there every single week, multiple times in a week, and then go and do it 2 different disciplines, yeah, it's pretty wild. I don't remember seeing another rider that's kind of this level, even men's, women's, for a while.
No, I'd agree. I think Ailey Shaw was an absolute standout rider. And it speaks volumes that she's going to a World Tour team now. So to avoid picking the same rider, I mean, it's a given. I would pick Ailey Shaw normally, but I think the other one that stood out for me was Sophie Lewis. She's a proven winner. She won 2 rounds this year, Beverley and Colne. Incredible crit rider, incredible track rider. I think to be able to do what she did within the dominance of Alba and Ailey Shaw is pretty impressive, and also highlights that there are other teams like Das Hutchinson Brother UK who are taking the fight to them, and they're not scared by the results of those top riders.
Exactly. Over for the men, I've gone for Ollie Rees, who I picked out for the road racing. Again, for the same sort of reasons, being able to go into the crits on your own in a foreign team, so 100% he hasn't got any teammates, and to be consistently up there. He didn't do all the rounds, so he wasn't up there in the overall, but the rounds he did do, he was always competitive. Obviously, that's ignoring Bostock and Scott, but they're two riders that are kind of, it's obvious they're a little bit older, they're experienced, they're on the scene, it's less of a surprise. It's not like Ailey Shaw, where she's younger and kind of still rising up through the ranks. They're very much where they should be, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And in my case, I can't see past Matt Bostock and Rob Scott, the two of them, but I can't really separate them either. And neither could the points at the end. It feels like on any given day, either one of those will win. And if they don't win, it's because something went wrong with both of their races at the same time.
In that case, would you go Toby Barnes then, as the kind of one of the only riders that?
Yes, if I had to pick one that wasn't Matt Bostock and Rob Scott, Toby Barnes. And again, a bit like you said, he is slightly older, he is more experienced, but he's not often had the opportunity to shine in these races. So to see him take the win and take it in such a dominant style, it wasn't just like, actually to row back on what I said, things didn't really go wrong for Rob Scott or Matt Bostock in that race. Toby Barnes just saw his moment, seized it, and it was like there was nothing they could do. And that's what he's capable of on his day. So if we can see him have that day more often in the future, I think that's going to be a really, really interesting crit scene in 2025.
It will be. And that rounds us off nicely. That hour has gone very quickly, chatting about crits. We could do it for another 5 hours if we wanted to. We'll finish it off. Were you at the cyclocross this weekend?
I will be, yes. South Shields is coming up this weekend, so maybe next week or the week after we'll have to kind of do some recaps on what's going on there. South Shields is Thomas Main's kind of home race. He has won it before. I'm not a betting man, but he could win it again. It's very much his race to lose.
I don't think the bookies allow you to bet on National Series cyclocross races, unfortunately. I don't know if you've walked into Betfred.
I have not. I don't think I ever have, and probably never will. But it's the South Shields is a really nice course. It's up on like a sandy area on the kind of seafront near Newcastle. And it's always a good race, and the question will be whether Toby Barnes can take the fight to Thomas Main. So that'll be an interesting one to see.
Sounds windy.
It is windy, very windy, cold, chilly, bites through the bone.
Proper cyclocross race then.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much for watching, listening to episode 3 of the Monument Cycling podcast. We'll be back next week. I have no idea what we'll talk about next week. Maybe there'll be another massive bombshell about a UK team that we chat about for an hour.
Please no. Please no. Fingers crossed. Yeah, on that note, thank you very much for joining me, Harry. Thank you very much for joining us. And hope we'll see you next time.